Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are in the chapter, The Philosophy of Rebirth, beginning on page 790 at the bottom of the page with the paragraph beginning, What we see of nature.
So, we are in the chapter about the rebirth, the philosophy of rebirth. So, he has told us already that depending on your view of life, you may believe or you may not believe the question of rebirth, whether there is rebirth at all or not. In fact, there are many philosophies where there is no rebirth. They don't believe in it. The Christian theory is that a soul is created and breathed into the body at the time of birth, and then at the end of that one life, the soul either goes to heaven or to hell, depending on how he has conducted his life. Then there is there's a theory of Mayavada. Mayavada does not give any reality to the physical world, including the individual soul. There is no individual soul. Okay? So, in these cases, there is no question of rebirth. Yeah. But even if there is a rebirth, okay, then a rebirth only for one time, it goes on coming, there has to be a purpose for rebirth. Why should rebirth be there at all? So, rebirth becomes very rational if you concede 2 points. The first point is that there is an evolution. If there is no evolution, then the question of rebirth is meaningless. You come and go on taking birth, what's the purpose? There is no aim. So, evolution is necessary to justify rebirth. Second thing is that the individual soul is real. The Mayavada theory, mostly when you experience and go to the silent mind, you see that the physical world is unreal. So, if the physical world is unreal, where is the question of the soul coming into unreality and going back again? So, Srimno says that evolution, if it is there, and we concede that the individual and the world is real, then there is a meaning, because there is an evolution. And you can't develop fully in one life. So, you have to keep coming back again and again to develop yourself. Okay? So, now I read the summary of what we read last time, so that we get a sense of continuity. Okay? So, Srimdas told us that there is a spiritual consummation, there is an aim, and the human soul has to become a divine, it has to attain a divine consciousness. So, if that is the purpose, then we can think of a rebirth. These are my words and what he has said in the previous para. If we deny the spiritual future consummation for man, then we presuppose a human origin and a human end to the soul. Now, this is the materialistic theory and many other theories also, that there is no evolution. Okay, so it cannot go beyond the human stage. It will remain stuck at the human stage only. If you think that there is no spiritual aim for the soul, there are many who don't know that there is a spiritual aim for the soul at all. I saw a video, an Englishman who had come, he was touring India, and the guide asked him, what do you think is the purpose of life? So he said, I don't see any purpose of life. We just come here, have experience and go back. So it's not uncommon to have that idea. Very few have the idea of a spiritual evolution and a goal in life. Okay? So if the goal is not there, then there is no question of any rebirth. Man gets stuck at this level only. So, but we must be clear that the body-mind life has not created the soul. The materialist says that your vital and your thoughts and all that are created by the inconscient. The body is created and the body is again manifesting life and matter. But Srimad is saying it's not like that at all. It's the soul that is creating all these things downwards. The upward evolution is true, but that's not the matter is not the ultimate reason for evolution. It's a Brahman consciousness, the supreme divine existence which is creating all these things downwards. It is true that there is an evolution, but that is secondary. The first thing is the involution, and then there is an evolution. Evolution cannot be without the involution. So that's what he's saying. Okay. So we must be clear that the body, life, and mind have not created the soul. It is a spirit that creates everything else. It may appear that the spirit is issuing out of the inconscience, but that's an illusion. This illusion is due to the fact that spirit has involved itself voluntarily in the inconscience. It is now evolving upwards to find itself. The human soul is not bound by body, life, mind. It has had a infra-human stage and it will have a supra-human future. So, the soul of man has first been at a very lower levels, plants, very rudimentary forms of life, and slowly it has come up to the human stage.
But it still seems bound.
Yes, it seems bound, but it is not bound actually. Right. That's what Shabda is saying. Now we read the para that we have to read today. What we see of nature and of human nature justifies this view of a birth of the individual soul from form to form until it reaches the human level of manifested consciousness, which is its instrument for rising to yet higher levels. Okay? So, he is saying that we see this in nature. We see that there is an evolution. So, it is quite likely that the individual soul has to take birth again and again. Okay? It reaches the human level of manifested consciousness. Now, note interestingly, he is using the word manifested consciousness. There is a consciousness which is not manifested above, in the vital world, in the mental world, in the spiritual worlds. But when it comes here, it is manifested. Okay? Manifested consciousness. When there is no life on earth and there is only stones, consciousness is not yet manifested. So when the life comes up, animals, even plants, then you see first of all that there is a consciousness in the plant. It seeks water, it seeks light, it needs the sap. So all these things are there. So there is manifested consciousness, which is its instrument for rising to yet higher levels. If the consciousness is not there, then there is no question of going up. Consciousness is the instrument by which you can rise higher and higher. Okay? We see that nature develops from stage to stage, and in each stage takes up its past and transforms it into stuff of its new development. This is, we see, first of all there is matter, and then when life comes up, life is not manifesting without matter. It takes matter and transforms it with life in it. Okay, that's what he's saying. We see too that human nature is of the same make. All earth past is there in it. Now this is very interesting, because when plants are coming up, it is integrating with matter. When the mind has manifested, it is still, there is life and there is matter both. So it is taking up the lower and going up. It is not rejecting. We saw that in the previous chapter, ascent and integration. So there is this thing, matter will always be there. Matter will be there even in the supramental race. But it will be transformed matter. In animals, matter is there, but life has been injected into matter. In human beings, consciousness, mental consciousness has been injected into matter. Okay? There is matter with only life and no mind. Take a muscle. We discussed this last time. The muscle has got life in it, but not mental consciousness. But your brain is matter into which there is life as well as mind. So in the same way, if there has to be a higher consciousness, it has to be matter with life, mind and a spiritual consciousness. But that body has to be developed. Okay, so.
And he uses the term earth past,
Yes.
hyphenated.
Yeah, earth past means he is talking of the from matter to plant life, and then from plant life to this, and the earth past. Okay, so that's what he's saying. That in nature also we see that. Okay. It has an element of matter taken up by life, an element of life taken up by mind, an element of mind which is being taken up by spirit. So, matter, out of matter comes life, but life is not devoid of matter. Mind also comes in, but mind is not devoid of life and mind, it is all there. Similarly, even when the spirit manifests in a physical body, that physical matter of the supermind will be transformed matter. Just like our brain is transformed matter for suitable for thinking. Exactly the same way. Okay, so an element of he sees what he has said in matter, life and mind, we see also in, that's what he is describing. Okay, so it has an element of matter taken up by life, an element of life taken up by mind, an element of mind which is being taken up by spirit. The animal is present in its humanity. We have an animal part, the vital. The very nature of the human being presupposes a material and a vital stage which prepared his emergence into mind, and an animal past which molded a first element of his complex humanity. So, man also has come from matter to plant life to animal life, and then finally a human stage. So, there has been a past. So, if there has been a past, there also has to be a future. And that future is a spiritual development. That's what Sibda is saying. Okay. And let us not say that this is because material nature developed by evolution his life and his body and his animal mind, and only afterwards did a soul descend into the form so created. He is denying the Christian theory. Yeah. Okay, so now something very interesting he says. Okay, there is a certain truth behind this idea, but not the truth which that formula would suggest. So what he is saying here, the soul does come into a body, but it's not a one-time phenomena. Okay. In fact, we know, this question is a very interesting one, when does the soul occupy a human body?
Mother speaks about many possibilities.
Yes.
She said it could be even a couple of years after,
Yes.
and could be well before,
Yes.
and during.
Yes. So, usually after the body is formed, after delivery, after the birth in the physical world, the soul can enter at that time, or the soul can also enter into the fetus.
Yes.
In the womb, the
Yes.
soul can come in. Or sometimes it is said, Mother had probably not said this, but the soul can enter at the time of conception itself.
And this is when people are aspiring together.
Exactly. When they are at a very high level of
Yes.
consciousness, they are going to produce a body which will be of a very superior kind. At that time, even at the time of conception, the soul can come in. So there is no fixed thing. It's also possible, as we discussed last time, that no soul will come into all the bodies being created. So when we say soul, we have to say psychic being, because the soul is there everywhere. The soul is a divine presence even in stones. But sometimes it can happen that a human being, the psychic being does not enter in. So he is just like an animal body living a normal life, but without a psychic being. I'll give you two instances, okay, very interesting. There used to be a photographic exhibition in the 1950s, okay. International Exhibition of Photography. Pondicherry was one of those conducting the exhibition. We used to get pictures from all over the world and we used to select. We used to get about 1,000 pictures.
Was this in Robi Ganguly's time?
Yes, that's right. So, and we used to select only about 100 pictures. So 90% rejected the best pictures were taken and they were exhibited in the exhibition hall. But at that time we didn't have the exhibition hall. It was there in the present laboratory.
Right.
That
I
was
remember. Yes.
Yeah. Opposite the PD office.
Yes.
So one day she came to inaugurate the exhibition and she started looking at all the pictures and there was a picture of a very beautiful looking child. Mother looked at that picture and said, "Why have you chosen this photograph?"
I remember this.
"Why have you chosen this photograph?" Then the photographer over there said, "Mother, it's a beautiful picture. Look at the face of such a sweet child." Mother said, "This child doesn't have a psychic being." So, it can happen. So, a human soul, rather the divine soul, can enter into a body at various times and sometimes need not also. It's not very common. It's a little uncommon, but it is possible. You have to make a distinction between psychic and soul. So the soul is a divine presence, undeveloped. Whereas the psychic being is something which has become developed and fully conscious of itself. This is what Sridhar is saying. Okay, so. And he is saying, let us not say that this is because material nature has developed by evolution his life and his body, his animal mind, and only afterwards did a soul descend into the form so created. There is a Christian theory.
Yes.
So, Sridhar is saying, and afterwards did a soul, and only afterwards did a soul descend into the form so created. There is a certain truth behind this idea, because a soul does come into a body, okay, at different times, but it's not a one-time phenomena. That's the difference. That's what he means. Okay? If you think it's a one-time phenomena, it's a wrong idea. It comes in, at the end of life it goes back, again takes birth. Okay, so but not the truth which that formula suggests. For that supposes a gulf between soul and body, between soul and life, between soul and mind, which does not exist. So Sridhar is saying, it is not that an unconnected soul enters into a body which is no relation with the soul. That's not true. There is a soul in the body, there is a soul in the life, and there is a soul in the mind, and there is also a soul at the highest level. But it's all one soul, taking different stands. You and I can't be here and at the same time somewhere else. But the soul consciousness is capable of doing that. It is capable of being at various stages at any time.
But it's not hierarchical, is it?
No, it's not hierarchical.
No.
Part of the consciousness of soul is up there. Yeah. There's a connection. That's what Sridhar is saying. Okay? So, for that supposes a gulf between soul and body, between soul and life, between soul and mind, which does not exist. So that's why Sridhar uses the word soul in nature, soul in life, soul in mind, okay? Yes. And soul in the supramental. So that presupposes a gulf between soul and life, between soul and mind, which does not exist. There is no body without soul. Now, when he uses the word soul here, he is meaning the divine presence. The divine, no body at all without a soul. It doesn't exist.
Not psychic being.
No, not psychic being, but soul. Okay, so there is no body without soul, no body that is not itself a form of soul. It's a form. The body also is a expression of the divine. So that also is divine essentially. That's what he's saying. So there is a soul of body, a soul of life. Okay. So usually the word Purusha is used for consciousness. So when you say there is a physical Purusha, there is a pranic Purusha, mental, life. There is a vital Purusha,
Yes.
there is a mental Purusha, and then there is a higher. Okay, so matter itself is substance and power of spirit. There you are. Matter itself is substance and power of spirit, and could not exist if it were anything else. For nothing can exist which is not substance and power of Brahman. So, the divine presence has to be there everywhere. If the divine presence is not there, it can't exist. Okay? So, that's what he's saying. For nothing can exist which is not substance and power of Brahman. And if matter, then still more clearly and certainly, life and mind must be that and ensouled by the presence of the Spirit. If matter and life had not already been ensouled, man could not have appeared, or only as an intervention or an accident, not as a part of the evolutionary order. So, I'll quickly read the summary of what we read just now. So, the idea. When we observe universal nature and individual human nature, we feel justified in the view we have taken, which is a series of births of the soul into physical forms until the soul reaches a human level. So, the soul takes continuous births in matter, then in life forms, in plant life, in animal life, and then finally human level. But Shankara says that to reach the human level, it takes 1 lakh of births. Of course, Srivendra doesn't say that, but this gives an idea of how long it takes for the development. Okay. Narajanma durlabha, he says. Narajanma, that means the human birth is very rare. It's very difficult to get that. So, but the population is going on increasing. We know that human beings now about 9 billion. Huh? But what about all the animal forms still there? What about the plant forms still there? They have not yet taken human birth. So that's what is being pointed out. Until the soul reaches the human level. In universal nature, we see the gradation from matter to life and mind. We see also that each level integrates the lower into the higher without rejecting it. Animal forms have a material body. The human mind is lodged in vitalized matter. Similarly, we see that the human being has preserved in himself all the lower previous levels of development. Even biologically, the fetus summarizes in itself all the earlier stages of its development, and in a swift, fast forward movement, we see that man has a material body and the vital animal remnant are quite prominently present in the psychological makeup of man. So, even when the body is being built from a unicellular creature, the body is being built, it undergoes all the forms of its earlier in 9 months. That's why I use the word fast forward. So that which is taken 1 million or 1,000 million years or million years is compressed into 9 months. The physical body undergoes all the stages of its development. Something of plant life is there, something of the amoeba stage is there, something of the cat, something of the dog, everything is there. Very interesting. So yeah. And here we must say that the inconscience is not the origin of all else, and that the spirit enters and occupies the human body after the inconscience has prepared the body for it. But this is not true. This is an illusion. Although there is a truth to the view, but that truth is not the monism of materialism. Soul, spirit. Soul and spirit has always a connection with earthly existence. It is spirit that gives rise to matter and not the reverse. If matter is for Brahman, then life and mind are much more forms of Brahman. Okay. He's saying that if we consider that matter also is divine, then life and mind are much more divine than that.
Sovereign spirit.
Pardon?
Sovereign spirit.
Yeah. That's right. Okay. Now, this is very interesting because in mother's case, before she took birth, her body was being prepared for mother's descent into the body. This is their time. In mother's womb, the body was being prepared for our mother to occupy it later. In other words, there is a connection.
Yes.
The Srila is pointing out that it is not without connection. There is always a connection. We also know that when a man is sufficiently developed in consciousness and reaches a yogic stage, very often they choose the place, the soul decides where it wants to manifest and come into your body. So there is always a connection. That's what he's pointing out. Okay, so that's right. So this is what we have read just now. We come to the next para. We arrive then necessarily at this conclusion that human birth is a term at which the soul must arrive in a long succession of rebirths, and that it has had its previous and preparatory terms in the succession, the lower forms of life upon earth. It has passed through the whole chain that life has strung in the physical universe on the basis of the body, the physical principle. In other words, at one time you were even a stone, the divine presence in the stone, then in a plant life, then in an animal life, and finally human life. Okay. So then the further question arises whether we might also note interestingly the Srila always uses the word farther.
Not further.
Yeah, he never uses the word further.
No.
Okay, so then the further question arises whether humanity once attained, this succession of rebirths still continues, and if so, how, by what series, or by what alternations? So, is human birth the last, or is there something beyond that? He is asking. He is writing this not for those who are knowledgeable. He is writing this for the general public. Okay, so. And first, we have to ask whether the soul, having once arrived at humanity, can go back to the animal life and body, a retrogression which the old popular theories of transmigration have supposed to be an ordinary movement. We will discuss this. It seems impossible that it should so go back with an entirety, with any entirety. And for this reason, that the transit from animal to human life means a decisive conversion of consciousness, quite as decisive as a conversion of the vital consciousness of the plant into the mental consciousness of the animal. So, it is surely impossible that a conversion so decisive made by nature should be reversed by the soul, and the decision of the spirit within her come, as it were, to naught. So what Srila is saying is that, okay, many births, but is it possible for a human soul to go back into an animal body? Now, there is this theory of Pythagoras. He had this idea of transmigration. So they had the idea at that time that there is rebirth, but a human soul can go into an animal body. Now Srila will discuss further and say that sounds very, very difficult to believe, because nature is progressing upwards. Suddenly, why should nature change her policy and go downwards? He says that's not possible.
It was popular in Egypt.
Yes, Egypt and also Greece.
and
Pythagoras
Greece.
was in Greece. So that time it was a common idea. But same to say that. Then he says that although I am saying that it is very rare, it can happen, but not in its entirety. He has used the word entirety. Okay? So what happens is sometimes that a human being's vital has got such strong desires which it has not satisfied itself with in one life, and after death that vital doesn't dissolve. In the normal process, first of all the body dissolves, then the vital dissolves and goes back into universal prana, the mind dissolves its substance and goes back into universal mind plane of consciousness. But sometimes the vital does not dissolve because it's got very strong formation.
Is it like a possession?
Yes,
Or
possession or ghost. That's right. There is a phenomenon of ghost. So it is possible sometimes for a human vital, not the soul, the human vital to enter into an animal form to satisfy itself. That's what he's saying. Okay? It's very interesting what he's saying. It is surely impossible that a conversion so decisive made by nature should be reversed by the soul, and the decision of the spirit within her come as it were to naught. So why should it go backwards? Okay, so it could only be possible for human souls, supposing such to exist, in whom the conversion was not decisive, souls that have developed far enough to make, occupy, or assume a human body, but not enough to ensure the safety of this assumption, not enough to remain secure in its achievement and faithful to the human type of consciousness. In the summary, we'll discuss it a little more in detail. Okay? Or at most, there might be, supposing certain animal propensities to be vehement enough to demand a separate satisfaction, quite of their own kind, a sort of partial rebirth, a loose holding of an animal form by a human soul, with an immediate subsequent reversion to its normal progression. So sometimes it can happen, but the soul immediately will take a human birth again next time. Okay, so the movement of nature is always sufficiently complex for us not to deny dogmatically such a possibility, and if it be a fact, then there may exist this modicum of truth behind the exaggerated popular belief which assumes an animal rebirth of the soul once lodged in man to be quite as normal and possible as a human reincarnation. But whether the animal reversion is possible or not, the normal law must be the recurrence of birth in a new human forms for a soul that has once become capable of humanity. So I'll read the summary, and there are a few points there that we. So Sembla is saying, we conclude then that the human birth for man is a present culmination, at present, after a long series of rebirths which prepare the soul to be fit for a human life. That soul entity must have graduated from lower forms of life on earth, plant, animalcule, animal, and then finally man. Now, the question arises whether the series of rebirths stops with man or continues its upward march, and if so, by what mechanism. But before that, another question must be considered. Is it possible for a human soul to go back into an animal body? This was the Pythagorean idea of transmigration. But it seems most improbable that nature, having so purposefully worked its way upwards, should suddenly decide to reverse the process and go backwards. There would be no logic to such a step, nor would it accord with the evolutionary purpose. But some exceptional cases may be possible. So, two cases I have given here. One is, if an animal soul has developed itself enough to leave the animal stage, but has not yet qualified itself for a human life, it could be that of a brief human life, babies dying, retarded children, biologically defective bodies. Okay, all these are possible. The soul is not very developed, but it has suddenly taken by some chance, it has taken a human body.
But even the primitive people are going upwards.
Yeah, everybody goes upwards, but it can happen sometimes.
It's a rare instance.
Yeah, this is what happens. So sometimes people wonder why there should be child mortality. This is the answer. That the soul which has come in cannot remain in a body so imperfect. So it rejects that body and there is death of the baby.
But I have even a more complicated question.
Yeah.
Why do great musicians and artists have to die in their early 30s?
That is the, my counter question to you will be, why not? What is so important about reaching 60 or 70?
Well, because they have a whole life to create.
They'll take another life. For the human soul, there is no question of time. Infinity is the thing.
Take your point.
So the question of a short life or a long life, it doesn't really matter. Nothing is rejected. You have another chance. In the ashram also we have had cases like that. No? There was my classmate, his name was Indravadan. At the age of 19, he had an accident and he died. But he comes back again. Nothing is finished with death.
True.
It's a continuing story.
But it still begs the question, when someone is creating something so magnificent and has to pass away.
Yeah, there is always a reason for it. There is always a reason. We had, you remember we had Doraiswami Iyengar?
Yes,
His
Doraiswami.
Yeah, Doraiswami Iyengar's daughter, okay, she had a son, 9 years old. He was crushed in a lorry accident. He died when he was 9 years old. So then the question comes up for the mother. She says, what is this? Why at all did he have to live 9 years and then die? Okay. Then why at all take birth when you are going to die in 9 years' time? But even that 9 years is enough for some development. And also, there would be a past life phenomena. Some reason in the past life where, okay, you develop one capacity, you need only 9 years you need. So a lot of explanations are possible.
You know the story of Orosan.
Of?
Orosan.
Yes, I remember.
The first one.
Yes.
He drowns in a pool.
Not pool. It's a tub of water.
Tub of water, yes. And mother said he did not want to be here. But then the second one is born, and now he's in his 30s. Interesting.
So this question does arise, that sometimes it happens. So child mortality is possible, but we see all these things in a very tragic manner. There is nothing tragic in the world. Everything has got a meaning.
Well said.
Okay, so now the question arises whether the series of rebirths stops with man or continues upward march. Then he's saying another question has to be discussed. Okay, is it possible for a human soul to go back into an animal body? This was the Pythagorean idea of transmigration. But it seems improbable that nature, having so purposefully worked its way upwards, should suddenly decide to reverse the process and go backwards. There would be no logic to such a step, nor would it accord with the evolutionary purpose. But some exceptional cases may be possible. One case, if an animal soul has developed itself enough to leave the animal stage, but has not qualified itself for a human life, it could be a very brief human life. Babies dying, retarded children, biologically defective bodies, okay. What you call biologically, they call it a congenital idiot.
Yes.
You have a human body, but you are not developed. Okay, so we had cases like that in the ashram. There was one case which was like that. Okay, he was absolutely hardly human. So, but this could only be a brief interlude and a swift return to the normal rhythm of nature. So it can happen, but immediately, if it's a human soul, it will take birth again in a human body. Another case could be when a human vital in an unsatisfied human body enters an animal body to complete its vital development. But this is rare, if at all possible. But the movement of nature is so complex that all is possible, and we will not take too dogmatic a stand on the issue. Okay? So, now there is another interesting thing also, which I have noted here. Note that a calf with 5 legs is possible. Okay? So is a child with a body, one body but 2 heads, twins. So this sort of thing can happen. So then the question arises, what about the soul? If there are 2 conjoined twins, is there one soul or 2 souls? So these are the questions which are very interesting. Okay, so it's possible. All these things are possible. Okay. Also, as organs in a human body being reversed, okay, left becoming right and right, biological freak chance. See, we have our heart here, and the stomach is here, and the liver is here. But very rare cases, the body is like that, but all the internal organs are reversed. It can happen. So these things are also possible. So many questions come up. The relation between. So when these occur, normally a developed soul will not take birth in a defective body. It does not happen.
Now, Mother spoke about her cat, Kiki, who was ready to take a human birth.
Yes, that's right. So, this is what he said in this para. Now, he is asking the question, but why a succession of human births and not one alone? Why should there be several? For the same reason that has made the human birth itself a culminating point of the past succession, a previous upward series, it must be so by the very necessity of the spiritual evolution. For the soul has not finished what it has to do by merely developing into humanity. It has still to develop that humanity into its higher possibilities. Obviously, the soul that lodges in a Caribbee or an untaught primitive or an Apache of Paris or an American gangster has not yet exhausted the necessity of human birth, has not developed all its possibilities or the whole meaning of humanity, has not worked out all the sense of Satchidananda in the universal man. Neither has the soul lodged in a vitalistic European occupied with dynamic production and vital pleasure, or an Asiatic peasant engrossed in the ignorant round of the domestic and economic life. We may reasonably doubt whether even a Plato or a Shankara marks a crown and therefore the end of the outflowering of the spirit in man. We are apt to suppose that these may be the limit because these and other like them seem to us the highest point which the mind and soul of man can reach. But that may be an illusion of our present possibility. Now, it's interesting to note here, he is mentioning Plato and Shankara, and he has said elsewhere that Plato and Shankara represent the peak possibility of intellectuality, the highest possible examples of intelligence. So he's saying that could it be that when you reach that stage, there's no more birth? That's what he's asking. Okay, so At any rate, this present highest point at least must be reached before we can write finis on the recurrence of the human birth in the individual, for the individual. Man is there to move from the ignorance and from the little life which he is in his mind and body, to the knowledge and the large divine life which he can compass by the unfolding of the Spirit. At least the opening out of the Spirit in him, the knowledge of his real self, and the leading of the spiritual life must be attained before he can go definitely and forever otherwhere. So, what's the meaning? When he says otherwhere, he is talking of other planes of consciousness. So, a human soul which has not had the divine realization here cannot live permanently in other places. It can live, in other words, only when it has reached a certain minimum level. Okay, so there may be beyond this initial culmination a greater outflowering of the Spirit in the human life, of which we have as yet only the first intimations. What it means is that there are human souls which have gone beyond the mental level, but they are rare, saying, okay, first intimations. Some yogis are there who are far superior to the normal human consciousness. Okay. The imperfection of man is not the last word of nature, but his perfection too is not the last peak of the Spirit. So even when a human being becomes perfect, Plato and Shankara, that's not the end. There is more and more to be done. Okay, so I read the summary of what this para says. Is the human life the last in a series of rebirths? It cannot be, since the purpose of evolution is clearly a divine perfection, not a human perfection. We see among men much variation of development. The wild tribes of South America, the European gangster or an Asian peasant, the domestic servant are obviously examples of incomplete human development. It can even be doubted whether Plato and Shankara mark the final perfection of man. The divine could have larger and more perfect states for man to reach. Man grows from ignorance to knowledge, but the unfolding of the Spirit is not yet complete. There could be more spiritual stages ahead, for which only dim indications and first intimations are seen at present. Man cannot be the last peak of the Spirit. That's what Simba is saying.
We've got a short paragraph.
We'll read.
We can do it.
Okay. So, this possibility, the possibility of a divine life, this possibility becomes a certitude if the present leading principle of the mind, as man has developed it, the intellect, is not its highest principle. So, if you, like the materialist thinks that man is the last level of evolution. But if you don't believe that, then the spiritual evolution can definitely continue. If mind itself has other powers as yet only imperfectly possessed by the highest types of the human individual, then a prolongation of the line of evolution and consequently of the ascending line of rebirth to embody them is inevitable. If supermind also is a power of consciousness concealed here in the evolution, the line of rebirth cannot stop even there. He's saying even when you reach the supermind, it cannot stop. It cannot cease in its ascent before the mental has been replaced by the supramental nature, and an embodied supramental being becomes the leader of terrestrial existence. So he's saying very clearly, intellectual man, spiritual man, supramental man. It has to go on like that. I'll read the summary of what this very small one.
Good.
This greater flowering of the Spirit in man becomes not merely a possibility, but a certainty if we find that mind is not the final stage of perfection. Spiritual experience does reveal higher planes of consciousness which are far superior to mind in consciousness and power. Then the ascent to these planes ensures that rebirth has to continue. And if supermind is a power concealed in the inconscious, then it must necessarily be the next step of the evolution. Superman, manifesting in the supramental consciousness, will become the leader of the earthly existence. That's what he's saying.
Thank you, Ranga. Namaste all. And we will conclude this chapter on Monday, the philosophy of rebirth, beginning on 793, the last paragraph.